Humiliated, before the court, until the Alpha King said, "Laugh at her again and you're dead." Walls were carved from black stone, polished to a reflective shine that made shadows crawl like living things. Torches flickered along the walls, their golden light trembling across banners that bore the mark of the Alpha King, a silver wolf under a blood-red moon. The throne loomed at the far end, carved from obsidian and inlaid with jagged silver veins. No one sat in it lightly. This was King Cale Draven's court, a man whose name was whispered with awe and fear. His silver eyes could pierce through the soul of anyone who dared meet his gaze. Rumors said he was cursed, born from an ancient wolf bloodline, carrying the weight of centuries of power and sorrow. None in the kingdom dared to defy him. None except the girl who now stepped into his hall. Lyra Vale walked with her head held high, even though the coarse ropes around her wrists bit into her skin. Her silks were tattered, faded remnants of her family's lost fortune. She had been summoned under accusation of treason, though the charge itself was vague. The court had come prepared to see a broken girl, trembling and obedient. Instead, they found a figure with fire in her eyes. The nobles leaned forward in their fur-lined chairs, their sneers sharp and venomous. "Look at her!" one whispered, a man with a hooked nose and a cruel smile. "Does she think she belongs here?" "She's human," another said. "No wolf blood. No strength. She cannot stand before the Alpha."
Lyra ignored them. She had no illusions about her place in this court, nor did she seek mercy.
She had come because she had no other choice. Her family had fallen, yes, but she carried a secret they did not know, a mark that bound her to the moon, a power ancient and dangerous, and one the Alpha King might recognize. The herald stepped forward, reading aloud the accusations. The words were sharp and cutting, meant to shame and humiliate. The court laughed as Lyra's hand shook against her chains. They mocked her clothes, her posture, even the way her hair fell across her face. One lord moved closer, leaning down to tip her chin upward with a clawed finger, forcing her to meet the gaze of everyone in the hall. Her heart pounded, but she could feel the weight of every eye on her, the heavy judgment, the malicious delight in her suffering. And yet she did not cry, nor did she beg. A calm defiance settled in her chest like iron. She would not give them the satisfaction. Then the laughter stopped. A low, dangerous growl rolled across the hall, vibrating through the stone floors. Heads turned toward the throne. A figure rose slowly, deliberately. Even in stillness, he commanded attention. "King Cale Draven," saw the Alpha King. He was not tall, but his presence dwarfed everyone else. Silver hair fell to his shoulders, catching the torchlight like liquid moonlight. His eyes were sharp, piercing, and cold, yet they carried something no one else had: recognition. They fell on Lyra, and the air seemed to bend around him. "Laugh at her again." His voice was quiet, but the threat within it made even the boldest noble stiffen. "And you're dead." Nobles stared at him, some frozen mid-laugh, others wide-eyed in fear. Lyra felt her heart skip a beat, but for the first time she was no longer the victim in the room. She was being seen, truly seen. Cale stepped down from the throne, each movement measured and deliberate. When he reached her, the chains that bound her wrists scraped against the stone floor. Instead of a threat, he extended his hand and unlocked the ropes with silver keys. The sound sharp in the quiet hall. "You shouldn't have come back, Moon-Marked," he whispered, just for her to hear. Lyra's chest tightened. She had never heard that name before, yet it resonated deep within her. The faint mark on her collarbone burned at his words. A reminder that her destiny was intertwined with his, whether she wanted it or not. The nobles dared not speak, their mouths dry. Murmurs ran through the hall like wind through dead trees.
Marked?
What does that mean? Cale ignored them. His gaze stayed fixed on Lyra, studying her as if weighing her soul against some invisible scale. And for a moment the human girl and the cursed king shared a silence that was heavier than any chain. The herald stammered, unsure whether to continue reading the accusations. Bet. Cale's voice cut across him. "She will remain under my authority," he said. The words were simple, yet absolute. No one dared question him. The court had seen enough humiliation for one day. Lyra's pulse quickened. She had not expected protection, only punishment. She studied Cale carefully, noting the subtle lines of fatigue around his eyes, the tense muscles under his cloak, and the faint tremor in his fingers. Behind the mask of the Alpha, there was pain, a storm barely contained. He motioned for her to follow him. The courtiers parted like water, whispers trailing in their wake. Some tried to mask their fear with contempt, but even the most brazen nobles could not hide the dread in their eyes. Cale led Lyra through the shadowed corridors of the palace, past towering tapestries that depicted centuries of Draven kings. Each painting was a reminder of power, conquest, and blood, and of the curse that had haunted his line for generations. "This way," he said. His voice held no warmth, only command. Psst. Yet there was a strange gravity in it that made Lyra obey. They entered a small chamber, sparsely furnished, with high windows that allowed moonlight to spill across the floor. Dell closed the door behind them, and for the first time, Lyra could see him truly, not as a king, but as a man trapped within himself. "You are moon-marked," he said finally. "I saw the sigil the moment you stepped into the hall. You carry the bond of the Moon Oath." "That mark has not appeared in centuries. It chooses its counterpart carefully, sometimes as a gift, sometimes as a curse."
Lyra swallowed. I don't understand. Cale's gaze softened just slightly.
"You will, soon. But you must know this. The bond is dangerous. It can bring salvation or death. And once it awakens fully, there is no turning back." She felt a shiver run through her. The chains in the court had been physical. The weight of destiny pressing against her chest, was far heavier. Cale took a step closer, and the room seemed smaller, the air thicker. "You do not belong here," he said, voice low. "And yet, you are here. That is no accident." Lyra looked up at him, meeting his silver eyes. In that moment, she felt something she had not allowed herself to feel in years. Hope.
"You could send me away," she whispered. "You could let them finish what they started."
Cale shook his head. "And let them control what I have waited centuries to witness. No." His eyes darkened. "They will learn soon enough that you are under my protection, and anyone who dares mock you again."
His jaw tightened.
"Will regret it for the rest of their days."
Outside the chamber, the court remained oblivious to the storm brewing within the palace walls.
But Lyra and Cale knew the truth. Their fates were now entwined. The bond had begun. The Moon Oath was awakening, and in its shadows, neither of them would remain the same. Lyra touched the faint mark on her collarbone. It pulsed under her fingers, warm and alive. She did not know what lay ahead, only that the Alpha King's protection came with a cost, one she might not yet be ready to pay. Cale studied her, a flicker of something unreadable passing through his eyes. Respect? Curiosity? Perhaps even a trace of admiration. He did not speak it aloud. Words were unnecessary here. Their silence carried a weight heavier than any accusation or threat. Then, with a deliberate movement, Cale opened the window. Moonlight poured in, bathing the room in silver. Shadows danced across the walls, long and twisted. Outside, the world of Elkaris waited, cruel, unyielding, and unaware that two of its destinies were now bound together. Lyra shivered, not from cold, but from the realization that her life had changed forever. Cale's voice cut through her thoughts, soft, yet unwavering. Rest tonight. Tomorrow, you begin training. You will need strength for what is coming. Shh. She nodded, uncertain whether she was ready for what lay ahead. But in her chest, a spark had ignited, a spark that refused to be extinguished, rasping the chamber. Closing the door behind him, Lyra pressed her hand to the mark once more. The bond pulsed, stronger this time, and the whisper of destiny stirred in her mind. Somewhere deep in the palace, a clock chimed midnight. But in the hearts of the Alpha King and the moon-marked girl, time had already shifted, and the first chapter of their intertwined fates was only just beginning. The palace of Velkaris seemed alive at night. Bet. Its halls echoed with whispers and footsteps that never belonged to anyone alive. Outside, the moon floated full and pale over the city, casting silver light across the black stone walls. Inside, Lyra Vale walked cautiously, still bearing the faint weight of the court's earlier humiliation. Though the chains were gone, her heart was not free. She had survived the public mockery, but whispers followed her like shadows. Some nobles looked at her with curiosity, others with contempt. A human girl, spared by the Alpha King, was not easily accepted. King Cale Draven had ordered her to remain in the palace. She would not be executed. She would not even face immediate punishment. Instead, she was under his personal authority, a strange combination of protection and imprisonment. For Lyra, it was confusing and frightening.
The first days were the hardest.
Cale did not speak much. His eyes followed her constantly, sharp as a blade, yet unreadable. What in is she was to train in the palace, not in swordplay or archery, but in patience, observation, and control. Cale had said the Moon Oath bond required balance, strength, and understanding. What that truly meant, Lyra did not yet know. In the mornings, she practiced walking through the halls without flinching. Nobles would whisper as she passed. Some mocked. Some stared. And some, she thought, looked at her with wonder. But the Alpha King's presence was never far. At times she could feel his eyes on her even when he was across the palace. And that thought both frightened and comforted her. One night, under the pale glow of the moon, Lyra found herself in the garden, a secret courtyard surrounded by high stone walls and climbing ivy. The air was cool, carrying the scent of jasmine and the faint tang of iron from the castle itself. She moved carefully over the cobblestones, feeling the pull of her mark beneath her collarbone. It glowed faintly, pulsing with a rhythm she could not yet understand. Ah! You should not be here, a voice said behind her. Be. Cale stepped from the shadows, his silver hair catching the moonlight, his eyes like molten silver in the dark. He moved with ease, silent as a wolf. I wanted to think, Lyra said, trying to keep her voice steady.
You will have little peace here, Cale said, taking a step closer. The court does not forgive easily.
They will look for weakness. They will test you. Lyra nodded, her fingers brushing the faint mark on her collarbone. I do not want their pity nor their fear. I want to survive. Kyle studied her. His expression softened, though just slightly. Craft. Survival is not enough. You must learn strength, strength of mind, strength of heart. That is the only way the Moon Oath will awaken safely, and even then, you will not understand it fully until the bond calls.
Rust.
Lyra's stomach tightened. The bond! Will it harm you? The Kyle's eyes flickered with something she had not seen before. A flash of vulnerability.
It could. It could also save me. That is the risk of the Moon Oath. She swallowed. The thought that she might carry both danger and salvation within her made her chest ache. And yet somehow she felt ready. Days turned into weeks. The noble's whispers never ceased, but Lyra began to understand the palace, its corridors, and its hidden spaces. Kale did not interfere often, but when he did, his presence was overwhelming.
At times, she felt trapped by it.
At others, she felt strangely protected.
One evening, during her evening walk through the training halls, she overheard two courtiers speaking in hushed tones.
They say the Alpha King has chosen her, one whispered. A human girl.
As his moon marked, madness. She may bring the curse upon him, the other replied. The last moon-marked queen died young. It is written in the prophecy, no one escapes the bond untouched. She had not known the depth of what she carried. She touched the mark on her collarbone, feeling its warmth. She was no longer merely a girl accused of treason. She was part of something ancient, something powerful, and perhaps dangerous. Kale entered the hall silently, as if he had been listening all along. His presence made the courtiers fall silent immediately. They bowed their heads in respect, or perhaps fear. Lyra noticed the way his eyes lingered on her for just a moment before he turned his gaze forward.
You should not listen to their words, Kale said softly. What matters is what you carry inside yourself, not what they whisper. Lyra nodded, uncertain whether his words were reassurance or warning.
Later that night, the palace erupted in alarm. The High Council had discovered fragments of forbidden records, old scrolls describing the Moon Oath and its bond. According to the ancient texts, the bond required a fated counterpart to awaken fully, and that counterpart often appeared once in a lifetime. To awaken the Alpha King's curse safely, the Moon-marked must be willingly choosing the path that fate demands. The council debated fiercely. Some saw Lyra as a threat. Others saw her as the key to the kingdom's future. Kale listened in silence, his face unreadable. When the debate ended, Kale summoned Lyra to his private chambers. The moon was high and bright, flooding the room with silver light. He did not speak immediately. Instead, he studied her quietly. "You have been bound to me by fate," he said finally. "That bond carries both power and danger. Past. You will train, you will learn, and you will survive. But you must understand, the moment the oath awakens fully, your life may change forever. Perhaps in ways you cannot yet imagine." Lyra met his gaze. "And if I refuse?" Kale's expression darkened. "Refusal is not an option. The bond will call to you whether you wish it or not. Ignoring it will not save you. Or me." A shiver ran down her spine. The weight of destiny pressed down like the palace stones themselves. And yet, she did not step back. She would face what was coming. As the nights passed, Kale began testing her, not with weapons, nor with magic, but with observation. He watched her reactions, her patience, her ability to remain calm under pressure. He asked her questions that seemed simple, yet carried weighty meaning. Phew! What would she do if someone betrayed her? If someone mocked her again? If someone tried to take her life? Each question tested more than her intellect. It tested her courage, her heart, and her will. One night during the training, Cale revealed a small courtyard where the moonlight shone brightly. He stepped into the circle and the glow from her mark pulsed stronger than before. "Place your hand over it," he instructed softly. Lyra hesitated. Her pulse raced. She had never touched the mark in this way before. Slowly, she pressed her hand to the pale skin beneath her collarbone. The air around them seemed to hum. A strange warmth spread through her chest, and she felt a connection, not just to Cale, but to something ancient, something beyond comprehension. Pat. For the first time, she understood part of the bond. Kyle's voice was quiet. "Do you feel it?" "The bond responds to your choice, to your will. It will grow stronger the more you accept it, but it will also test you. It will demand sacrifices, and it will show you who you truly are." Lyra looked up at him, breathless. "I think I understand."
Cale nodded.
Understanding is the first step. Control comes next. Paid. And only after control comes harmony.
Weeks passed.
Lyra's training continued, both in the palace and in secret courtyards under the moonlight. She began to feel a connection to Cale beyond the physical or magical. She understood his silences, his small gestures, the subtle ways he observed the world. Cale, in turn, began to see something unexpected in Lyra. Not just courage, but resilience. Not just defiance, but insight. She was not a child, nor merely a girl to be protected. She was strong in ways he had not anticipated, and for the first time in centuries, Cale Draven felt a sense of calm around someone other than himself. But peace was fleeting. One evening, as Lyra returned to the training hall, she found two masked figures waiting. Before she could react, they lunged, grabbing her arms. She struggled, but they were strong, and she was unarmed. Panic surged, but the glow of her mark flared in response, casting silver light around the room. The attackers froze for a moment, and in that moment Cale appeared, moving like a shadow. The fight was over in seconds. Cale's silver eyes glowed, and the attackers fled, their courage broken by the Alpha King's presence. Lyra stood trembling, heart racing, staring at the man who had saved her. "Again. You are not safe here," Cale said, voice low and controlled. "But you are mine! Remember that!" "No one will touch you while I am here." Lyra's hands shook. Why protect me?" Cale's eyes softened slightly. "Because you are not what they think you are."
And because I cannot let you be hurt. For the first time, Lyra realized that protection carried its own weight.
She was bound to Cale by more than destiny, by trust, by recognition, and perhaps by something deeper, something unspoken. Outside, the moon shone full and bright, bathing the palace in silver. The palace itself seemed to hold its breath. Lyra touched her collarbone, feeling the faint heat of her mark pulsing stronger than ever. The bond was awakening. And deep inside her, she knew that the coming days would test her in ways she could not yet imagine. The moon hung heavy over the palace of Velcoris, casting silver light across its spires and shadowed courtyards. Inside, Lyra Vale paced her chamber, restless and tense. Though the nobles whispered and plotted outside, their schemes could not reach her here. Yet, the threat in her heart came from something more personal, more dangerous. The knowledge of her bond with King Cale Draven, the Alpha King. Days had passed since Cale had saved her from the masked attackers. Each encounter had left her pulse racing and her thoughts scattered. He was ever present, yet distant, silent, yet watching, commanding, yet strangely protective. Lyra felt the weight of the moon oath growing stronger, its heat pulsing beneath her collarbone, calling her forward into a destiny she did not fully understand. The palace halls were quiet that night. The moonlight shimmered across the obsidian floors, and the torches flickered faintly. Lyra could hear faint footsteps approaching, deliberate, soft, familiar. She did not need to turn. Cale was there, his silver eyes reflecting the moonlight. "You should rest," he said, voice calm but firm. "I cannot," Lyra replied. "The bond, it grows stronger each day. I feel it calling me, but I do not know what it wants." Cale studied her carefully, taking a step closer. "The bond will not harm you, not unless you resist it.
It seeks harmony, not destruction. But you must understand, once fully awakened, it will demand more of you than you think."
Lyra swallowed. "More than I can give?" Cale shook his head slowly. "More than anyone can anticipate. The bond tests courage, patience, and heart. That is why it is not awakened for centuries, because few are ready to face its truth."
Her pulse quickened, a mixture of fear and anticipation stirring inside her.
She wanted to understand, to grasp the purpose of the bond and her role in it. Yet each heartbeat carried the weight of possibility. She might save Cale, or she might destroy him. Before she could ask, a sudden commotion erupted in the palace corridors. Shouts and alarms shattered the calm of the night. Lyra's heart leapt into her throat. Masked figures poured into the hall, moving swiftly, precise in their attack. Courtiers screamed as the intruders pushed forward, their goal clear: Lyra. Kyle's eyes blazed silver. He did not hesitate. With a movement faster than thought, he shifted, his form blurring at the edges. Moonlight glinted along his fangs, and the hall echoed with the low growl of the Alpha.
He was no longer fully human, not yet fully beast, but a storm of power and wrath incarnate.
Lyra froze for a moment, fear gripping her. Then, instinctively, she pressed her hand to her collarbone, feeling her mark glow brighter than ever.
The pulse of the moon oath surged through her, tethering her to Cale in ways she could not fully describe. The first intruder lunged.
Cale moved like lightning, intercepting the man before he could reach her. Claws and silver eyes, teeth flashing. The court's guards barely recognized their king as the battle unfolded. Lyra's mark flared again, sending a wave of heat and light through the hall. The attackers faltered, their confidence shaken by the surge of power emanating from the moon-marked girl. Cale fought with precision, his strength amplified by the bond that pulsed between them. Yet even as he protected her, he glanced at Lyra. Her courage, her willingness to face danger without fear strengthened him. The Alpha King realized something he had never admitted before. He had survived centuries of power and solitude, but he had never needed anyone. Until now, a last intruder fell, fleeing into the shadows, leaving the hall in silence once more. Courtiers stared, wide-eyed, as Cale returned to Lyra's side. His breathing was heavy, but his eyes remained fixed on her. "You are not safe here," he said softly. "The council, the enemies within, they know the truth of the bond. They will try again. But while I live, no one will touch you." Lyra's hands trembled. I do not want anyone to be hurt for me." Cale's expression softened.
though the edge of the beast remained. It is not about what you want.
It is about what must be done. That is the truth of the bond.
You will not face it alone, Lyra. You never have.
She looked up at him, heart pounding. There was fear, yes, but also something deeper, a connection that went beyond words. She realized then that the moon oath was not merely a magical tie. It was trust, understanding, and something she could not yet name.
The following days were tense.
Kale increased her training, not in weapons, but in awareness. He taught her to read the intentions of those around her, to anticipate danger, to control the surge of power from her mark breaths. At first it frustrated her. She longed to fight physically, to face danger head-on. But gradually she began to understand. The bond required harmony, strength tempered by wisdom, courage balanced with patience. Yet the palace was never truly safe. One night, Lyra was studying the ancient scrolls in the library when she heard hushed voices. 2 figures crept toward her, moving silently, their intentions clear. Before she could react, they grabbed her arms. Panic surged, but then, instinctively, she pressed her hand to her collarbone.
The glow of the moon oath flared outward, blinding her attackers momentarily. And then Kale appeared,
and moved with the grace of a shadow, swift and silent. Within moments, the attackers were fleeing, their courage broken by the sheer presence of the Alpha King. Lyra stood trembling, her chest heaving. Why do they keep coming for me? She asked. Pale's gaze darkened. Because the bond is awakening. They fear what it represents. They fear you. And they fear me. I am not ready for this. Kale reached out, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. You will never be fully ready.
That is why the bond tests you, to see if courage can grow even when fear is strong, to see if the heart can endure when the world conspires against it.
Her pulse quickened. And if I fail? Then I will not fail you. That is my choice. For a moment, silence fell between them, broken only by the distant howl of the wind outside the palace walls. Lyra's mark pulsed beneath her fingers, warmer now, stronger. Despair. She felt the bond responding to Kale's presence, to his protection, and to her own courage. Yet the danger had only begun. A messenger arrived the next morning bearing news that shook Lyra to her core. The High Council had discovered the full prophecy of the moon oath. According to the ancient scrolls, the moon-marked must willingly offer herself under the blood moon to awaken the Alpha fully. Failure or refusal would not only break the bond, but could consume both the Alpha and his chosen counterpart.
Lyra's heart pounded. The blood moon would rise soon. The very survival of Kale, perhaps even the kingdom, rested upon her choices.
That night, as she lay in her chamber, the weight of destiny pressed against her chest. She traced her mark, feeling the heat and power coursing through her veins. She was not merely a girl accused of treason anymore. She was a linchpin in an ancient bond, a bond that demanded courage, sacrifice, and a heart willing to face the impossible. When Kale entered her chamber quietly, she was not surprised. His silver eyes reflected the moonlight, and his expression was unreadable. "They will try again," he said softly. "You must be ready. But remember, the bond grows stronger with choice, with acceptance, not with fear, not with hesitation." Lyra nodded, feeling the pulse of her mark thrum beneath her fingers. "I
she whispered.
Kale stepped closer, and, for the first time, he allowed a faint softness to touch his eyes. You may not know the strength you hold until the moment it is needed most. Outside, the moon glowed full and bright, casting silver across the palace spires. Within the walls, a human girl and a cursed Alpha King prepared to face a destiny centuries in the making. Paration. And deep in the shadows of the palace, enemies plotted. The bond between Lyra and Kale had not gone unnoticed. A trap was being set, one that would test the limits of courage, trust, and heart. Lyra did not know it yet, but the coming days would demand more from her than she could imagine. The blood moon would rise, and with it the true test of the moon oath. The blood moon rose high over the kingdom of Velkaris, painting the obsidian spires of the palace in a ghostly red light. Shadows stretched long across the courtyards, twisting like living things. Inside, Lyra Vale stood alone in the grand chamber, the ancient sigils of the moon oath glowing faintly beneath her skin. Her chest burned, not with fear, but with anticipation. She had trained for this moment, yet no amount of preparation could truly ready her for what the night demanded. The prophecy was clear. To awaken the Alpha fully, the moon-marked must willingly offer herself under the blood moon. Refusal would bring disaster. The bond could not survive, and both she and King Kale Draven might be lost. The weight of destiny pressed upon her. Yet within it she sensed a strange power. She was no longer merely a girl accused of treason. She was part of something ancient and enduring. The doors of the chamber swung open. Brasp, Kale entered, his silver eyes reflecting the red glow of the moon. His form tall, commanding, and yet tense. Even the Alpha King, feared by the entire kingdom, bore the weight of uncertainty in his gaze. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice low, steady yet tinged with worry. Lyra met his eyes. "I am," she whispered, her hand pressed to the mark on her collarbone, feeling the pulse of the moon oath. "But I do not know if I can do this alone." "You will not be alone," Kale said. His hand brushed hers, a fleeting touch, but enough to anchor her. "I am bound to you, as you are to me." "That bond will not break, not while we choose to face it together." The chamber seemed to vibrate with energy. The sigils beneath Lyra's skin flared, sending waves of silver light outward. Kale's eyes glowed in response, his silver hair catching the red light of the moon. Desk Mascan. The Alpha was shifting, his form growing larger, his presence more commanding, the curse within him stirring, sensing the final awakening. Lyra stepped forward into the circle etched in the floor, her heart steady despite the pounding in her chest. She felt the power of the moon oath surging, a tide of warmth, strength, and connection. It pulled at her, beckoning her toward the ultimate choice, to submit, to sacrifice, or to share in the power fully. Bye.
Kale moved beside her. "Do not offer yourself in fear," he warned.
The oath responds to courage and choice, not to desperation. You will not fail, not if your heart is true. Lyra took a deep breath. She remembered all the lessons, all the moments of training, all the times he had saved her, and she realized with clarity she had never known before that the bond was not just about survival. It was about trust, recognition, and strength, shared between two beings who had found each other across centuries. With a deliberate motion, she raised her hand to his chest, over the glowing sigil that marked the Alpha. The power surged outward, meeting her own, intertwining, pulsing. The air in the chamber thickened, charged with ancient energy. The blood moon light intensified, casting long shadows across the walls. Bad. Kale's form began to shift fully, the beast inside him awakening, massive and unstoppable. His claws scraped the stone floor, and his fangs gleamed as he stared at her, eyes silver with power and something more, vulnerability. "You may choose," he said, voice low, resonant. "This is your moment. You may give yourself, or share in the bond with me." Her pulse raced, but she was no longer afraid. Fear had been tempered by courage. Doubt had been replaced by trust. She pressed her hand firmly against his chest, feeling the warmth, the heartbeat, the pulse of a centuries-old curse waiting to be transformed. "I do not give myself in death," she whispered. "I choose to share it, to face it with you." The sigils flared brighter than ever, flooding the chamber with silver light that clashed with the red of the blood moon. Kale's roar echoed across the palace, but it was not a roar of rage. It was a roar of release, of recognition, of transformation. The curse that had haunted him for centuries began to shift, responding to the strength and choice of the moon-marked girl. Lyra's mark burned, bright and warm, linking to the sigil on Kale's chest. She felt the surge of the bond coursing through her veins, a wave of power, understanding, and connection. It did not consume her. Instead, it lifted her, strengthened her, tethered her to the Alpha in ways she had never imagined. Kale's form settled, his silver eyes meeting hers. The beast within him bowed, not in submission, but in recognition of an equal. For the first time in centuries, the Alpha King was no longer bound by his curse alone. The moon-marked had not sacrificed herself. She had chosen courage, trust, and partnership, and in doing so transformed him, herself, and the bond between them. The chamber was silent, except for the sound of their breathing and the faint pulse of the sigils. Outside, the moonlight softened, the blood moon fading into dawn. The palace seemed to exhale, as if the ancient stones themselves acknowledged the shift in destiny. Kyle lowered his gaze to Lyra. "Destrious. Ah, you are stronger than I imagined," he said softly. "Stronger than anyone I have ever known. You have not only survived the bond, you have tamed it." Lyra smiled faintly, exhausted but triumphant. It was not taming alone, Peer. It was trust and courage.
And he reached out, taking her hand fully in his grip firm and steady.
Then we face what comes next, together. The palace, which had once been a place of fear and suspicion, seemed to change around them. Courtiers peered through the high windows, seeing not a human girl and a cursed king, but a pair bound by choice, courage, and newfound power.
Whispers ran through the halls. The moon-marked had survived, and the Alpha King had changed.
But not everyone in Belcaris welcomed the transformation. From the shadows, a noble, one who had mocked Lyra before, watched with clenched fists and hatred in his heart. He whispered under his breath, unaware that his words carried no threat anymore. Lyra and Kale had proven themselves. The bond was awake, and anyone foolish enough to test them would see the consequences. Tanned into weeks, and the palace settled into a new rhythm. Lyra trained not to fight the bond, but to strengthen it, to understand its pulse and its lessons. Maya's Kale remained by her side, teaching her, protecting her, and trusting her. The Alpha King, who had once ruled through fear, now ruled alongside a moon-marked queen who could calm his beast with a single touch. They shared quiet moments beneath the moonlight in the palace gardens, the silver glow reflecting in their eyes. Conversations flowed that were not about strategy, duty, or power, but about dreams, hope, and the future they could build together. And though the court still whispered and plotted, none dared interfere. The bond between Lyra and Kale was too strong, their courage and choice too evident. One evening, at the next royal gathering, The noble who had once mocked her dared to whisper under his breath, assuming she would be afraid. Lyra's eyes met his. Silver light pulsed faintly from her mark, mirrored in the Alpha King's gaze. She stepped forward, calm, unshaken.
Laugh again, she said softly, her voice carrying across the hall.
Proud, he realized with sudden clarity that he underestimated not only her courage, but the bond that now linked her with the Alpha King. And this time, she continued, he will not be the one to stop me. The hall shivered at her words, and no one dared mock the moon-marked girl again. The court understood that a choice had been made, a bond had been awakened, and it would not be broken. In the quiet moments after the gathering, Cale stood beside her, silent but present. Lyra looked up at him, feeling the warmth of the bond and the weight of shared destiny. "You are no longer alone," he said, his voice softer than it had ever been. "The curse has changed. We have changed. Together, we face the future, whatever it may bring." Lyra's hand brushed his, their fingers entwined. She felt the pulse of the moon oath beneath her skin, steady, strong, alive. It was no longer a threat, but a promise of strength, courage, and partnership that would endure through all the trials yet to come. The moon hung bright over Velcaris, but inside the palace, a greater light shone. The bond between a human girl and the Alpha King, transformed by trust, choice, and courage. Their hearts beat together, steady and true, echoing through the stone halls like a legend just beginning to be told. And in that moment, Lyra understood something she had never known before. Love was not weakness, nor was power alone enough to rule. True strength came from courage, choice, and the willingness to face destiny together. The kingdom of Velcaris had witnessed the awakening of the bond. And in the quiet that followed, a new chapter began, one of hope, courage, and an unbreakable connection between two souls bound by the moon oath.